get. And the past 10 months are a testament of the kind of trials and tribulations we faced. And it's about time that somebody's eyes open up and really started giving us a lot more justice, a lot more credit. Indian food industry, the entire Indian hospitality industry is producing almost 2% of the GDP of this nation. 2%. That's a huge number, considering that 7 years ago we weren't even considered an industry. We're also the second largest employer of human capital in this country after agriculture, employing millions of people. We pay thousands of crores in taxes, and yet the past 10 months have been full of trials and tribulations. So the first part of my little talk is going to be about what we've gone through in the past 10 months. And all my friends sitting in the audience who've been part of this whole stormic series of events, are going to perhaps understand what we've actually been through. You know, it started in November. I was shooting for this show called MasterChef India, and we'd gone down to Sydney, Australia to shoot for one of the final episodes. On the way back, it was around, I think, 7th or 8th of November, and I was very excited to hear about the American presidential election, whether Hillary's going to win or Trump is going to win, and that was top of my mind. So I got on the aircraft, and I knew there's going to be no internet in the air, so the moment I landed, I've switched on my phone to check the results. And I open up timesofindia.com. That's my go-to website. I open it up, and instead of seeing the presidential election results as the first headline, I saw something called demonetization. Honestly, I didn't even know what demonetization is till that time. It's a life-changing event, right? None of us have seen it. It's only happened 8 times before with variable levels of success across the world. So I didn't know what it was. I immediately read the next story that was about Trump, and I was shocked. Then I went back to the first story about demonetization and read it, and I was even more shocked. First time a victory, which is, Trump's victory was actually less shocking than other pieces of news. And at that time I thought, demonetization, well, we're a company, 80% of our transactions are credit cards, this is not going to affect us at all. And for the first 2 months of the demonetization process, which is November and December, that was probably true, because they were high season times, right? I'm seeing a lot of my friends sitting, and we all know that November and December are the peak season times where we do almost 30%, perhaps 40% more business than the rest of the year. So there was no real impact. In fact, the same store sales growth for some of our restaurants, in fact, most of our restaurants were actually above the year before. So I said, wait, this is great. Apparently the demonetization has no major impact on our industry. But then came Jan, and suddenly we realized that this is big. Across the industry, there was at least a 15% decline in sales. And this was not because people suddenly relied more on cash. It was a whole psychological mindset change. People stopped spending. People did not know about the future. They were not sure. We actually had about 3 to 4 months of continuous low sales, especially compared to the previous year, because of demonetization. Now, we can always argue whether it's good or bad. And honestly, in hindsight, I think it's a great move, and I'm fully for it. And now, luckily, the entire effect has worn off. I think now you're seeing a lot of electronic transactions increasing, which is great. You're seeing people going back to the older spending habits. Psychology has changed. People are feeling more upbeat about the future, and it's turned out well. So demonetization was one major, major thing. But then came the big one, and this was about the liquor ban. And all this is happening. Listen, guys, this is all happening in a period of 3 months. I mean, we haven't had this kind of onslaught onto the industry in decades. It was like somebody's painted a target on our backs and somebody's literally firing off arrows. And the liquor ban seemed ridiculous to most of us. Simply because when you study the facts, you find that the liquor ban has almost no impact on drunk driving deaths on the highways. It probably has a bigger impact within the city limits, but that's another thing. And it was just weird to see the government take such a strong stance on something which was not following statistics or logic. And if you do the math, I'm going to talk about some basic math which is going to really surprise you guys. Goa has one of the highest per capita consumptions of alcohol in the country. They consume about 200 ml of some liquor-based beverage in a week. Gujarat is technically a prohibition state, right? So it should have either zero or very low per capita consumption of alcohol. But the number of deaths because of drunk driving in Gujarat are 4 times more than that in Goa. That's an unbelievable statistic. Kerala, which is one of the highest consumptions, in fact even more than Goa, has 1/10 the number of deaths on the highway due to drunk driving as opposed to Gujarat. These are mind-numbing numbers and clearly proves that shutting down liquor within 500 meters of a highway are not effective in controlling drunk driving deaths on the highways. The way to do it is through governance. Luckily, about 3 days ago, we've had some great news. We've found that the Supreme Court has woken up and they've understood that banning of liquor within city limits is not solving the problem on the highways. So that's been sorted. But even then, some of the excise departments in some of the cities are a little slow to act. But that's fine. I'm sure they'll get there. So that's a very positive news. So that's two. Now, listen, guys, stay with me. That's two massive events that have happened within a 3-month period, right? Then comes the third one. And this one is another life-changing event. And what I mean by life-changing event is that none of us in this room are probably going to witness something of this scale again in the future. And this was the GST. Now, the GST, personally speaking, I kind of like the GST because it's given us a lot of benefits. But this is a major, major step ahead. The entire tax regime of a country has changed. The industry, honestly speaking, is better off for it. There's more transparency. There are not 10 taxes. No education, Swachh Bharat, all that stuff is not there. So it's easier for the consumer to understand their taxation. It's easier for them to figure out what kind of bill they'll be paying. So it's good for the industry. But it's still a big event. And this is the third huge thing that's affected the industry within a period of 3 to 4 months. And obviously now we're seeing the GSTs settle in beautifully. So great job to the powers that be that have made sure that the rollout has been good. It's being embraced by the industry as well as the consumers, which is great. Somewhere in the middle of these 3 big events, there was another 4th event, which I found actually quite strange. And I had to, for the first time, vehemently get on to TV, and I went to 2-3 channels because I wanted to speak about it, was about the portion control. So our Honorary Minister, Ram Vilas Paswan of the Food and Consumer Affairs Division, suddenly started talking about portion control in restaurants. And I was like literally blown away. To have somebody decide how many pieces of chicken or paneer I'm going to have in my restaurant seemed a little ridiculous to me. It was something that truly blew my mind that something like this can happen. So I started thinking, what's going to be next? Are they going to add a gluttony tax if I put another piece of paneer or chicken in my dish? Are they actually going to have a fresh set of taxations and define perhaps what Tuesday, perhaps we should not have any non-veg served in North India? I mean, I think beyond a point, the industry has to be given the respect that an industry of this size produces. I mean, 2% of the country's GDP is being provided by us. It's something very, very important. So these were the 3 or 4 major events that affected us in the past 10 months. But some good things are also happening. So definitely the Supreme Court lifting the ban within city limits is great. Second good thing that's happened is one of the young politicians of Bombay is actually planning on making Bombay a 24/7 city. In fact, Aditya Thackeray has had some very key conversations with the powers that be within his city, and he's trying to make licenses go longer, 24/7 restaurant licensing applicable, and in general, he's also looking at getting a single window for all licenses. Just imagine, guys, if you want to make a city, a world-class city from a tourism perspective, you want to add value to an entire industry, to an entire nation, we have to allow things like this. If you go to London, London in the past 10 years has had a significant increase in the number of tourists visiting them. Why? Because the quality of the food has suddenly gone up. It's now become the gourmet capital of the world. They've got more Michelin stars than any other city in the world. They've got higher quality restaurants. Their pubs have been standardized. They're producing great food. And the primary reason for most of us to travel is perhaps food. At least for me, it definitely is. You know, we were talking about, the lady who was hosting the MC was talking about, you know, food is love. I live for food. I mean, I think most of us here can definitely agree that food is the one thing you can do 3 times a day and never get bored for the rest of your life. So it's a very important thing. And I think the industry deserves the kind of respect, deserves the kind of credit that other industries enjoy. And great agencies like the FHRAI, the NRAI are bringing us together and giving us a common voice, a lobbying voice. I think that's important. So that's what the past 6 months have been. Very tumultuous, very turbulent, but we've come out strong. And I think all of us in the industry that have survived are now looking at much more calmer seas ahead and looking at an industry that's going to grow even more considerably. Now let's talk about a little bit about the future. You know, Ritu mentioned about the millennials, and I completely agree that most of the concepts nowadays are geared towards the millennials. Even some of us oldies in the industry are targeting the millennials. And a millennial is somebody who's born 1982 onwards. So I missed that boat a little bit. But anybody born beyond 1982 and turned into early youth by the turn of the century is a millennial. And it's a person who is extremely, extremely clear in what they want. We're the youngest country in the world. 60% of our population is below 35, which means that the restaurant industry has got the largest potential database of people that any country's ever seen in the past 5 decades. You're looking at 35%, 60% of the 1.3, 1.4 billion people that we have are under the age of 35. That's huge. They're going to be the ones that are going to be defining what the restaurant industry produces, because they're going to be our biggest target clientele. They're also going to be people that are extremely open to fresher experiences, so innovation is going to be the key. The millennial is somebody who's okay in sharing. They're okay having to share a taxi with an Uber. They're okay renting an apartment. But what they really want is an amazing social experience multiple times a week, which is great for us. You're looking at the millennials spending about $200 billion. That's $200 billion in 2017 alone. And the largest part of this $200 billion, the gross disposable part of this $200 billion is going to be towards food, which is huge, right? You're talking about 40% of this $200 billion potentially being channeled towards food. And you're looking at a country which is the youngest in the world. So you have to create concepts that focus on the millennials. The millennials are the future. Any restaurant company that wants to thrive and go forward in the next few years has to develop concepts for it. That does not mean you only build pubs. It means you build innovation into your model. You come up with high energy spaces, or you come up with fresher concepts, fresher innovative ideas that really make these millennials stay back. I personally feel that another mega trend that's coming up is that of Indian restaurant companies going overseas. I've always believed from the core of my heart that Indian food is the most sophisticated cuisine in the world. It's got unbelievable culinary philosophy. It's got unbelievable depth. It's got unbelievable variety. Every few kilometers, every state has its own food. It's outstanding. But nobody knows about it. Most of the world still thinks of us as greasy takeaway. And we got to change that. Barring the UK, no other country considers Indian as a predominant destination for eating out on a daily basis. No other country. And we got to change that. We really have to change that. Nobody from overseas, no Chinese or American or Japanese person is going to come and help us do that. And the way to do that is to repackage it, to rethink it. I remember Japanese food in the 90s used to be, fairly relegated to a few restaurants, not known at all. Then came Nobu. Nobu came and he introduced a level of modernity, a level of freshness into Japanese food, and we all know now the global phenomenon that it's become. And that's what's needed with Indian food. Gone are the days of serving katoris of dal with a swirl of cream on top. People are not interested. The world, if you want them to wake up and literally understand our food, we got to modernize it. We got to make it look better. We got to make it taste authentic, but come up with a fresher way of presentation, more innovation, coming up with, I hate the word fusion because it could lead to confusion, but definitely make it more progressive. And part of that is, in fact, the largest part of that is going to be the responsibility of the restaurateur. We have to open these restaurants across the world. We have to do a good job of making sure the quality is there, and we have to do a good job of making sure that the perception of Indian food improves. Once we do that, I have no doubt that in every major city of the world, one of the top 3 dining destinations will include an Indian restaurant. I have huge hopes for our cuisine. I think we have the most amazing cuisine in the world. And through the efforts of most of the people in this room, if we put our minds together, we'll be able to create something truly magical and make it one of the dominant cuisines in the world. With that, I just want to say thank you all for being here. Thank you, Ritu, for having us and for creating this wonderful platform. And wish you guys great 2 days ahead.
Thank you very much indeed for sharing those wonderful insights and your perspectives, and also for ensuring that you have introduced some of the most genre-defining restaurant concepts in the Indian cuisine. So thank you once again. On that note, let's march ahead now to also invite our next keynote speaker, ladies and gentlemen, who is the Chief Executive Officer and Secretary, Coffee